Let me tell you a little bit about what we know so far about the government scheme. And if Paul can join us, then that's great. But otherwise, I'll just fill you in with what I know. So, phase one of this scheme is for individual households who have a contact, maybe a named contact in Ukraine, to be able to welcome a family or an individual into their house. That is phase one. This is the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and it's unlike anything we've really done formally in the UK since maybe the Kinder Transport, when individuals were welcoming children fleeing the Nazis. These are not unaccompanied children that are coming, as you heard from Ruslan. These tend to be women and maybe two children, sometimes an elderly person. When I was at the border in Moldova, it was definitely mothers and children that were coming. And so these people are going to come into our homes. There's some concerns because there hasn't been time or infrastructure in order to do the same kind of safeguarding checking that we might have done if this was a foster care situation, where you'd have to go through a very strong vetting process. But that isn't happening this time round. And so people are going to be invited into people's homes. And we're going to talk a little bit later about what we could do to help with that safeguarding. But phase two is expected to involve community groups, churches, and businesses. Now, the government hasn't rolled out what that looks like yet. So in anticipation, I'm going to tell you, or we're going to talk through the rest of our time together, some of the ways this has worked in the past so that we can get busy, practical in getting ready for that phase two. And I know everyone's kind of frustrated that we don't know what phase two is, but at one level, the government's working round the clock to deliver this really exciting new scheme that hasn't been done since the Second World War. And again, 150,000 people across the UK have said they wanted to participate. That is unheard of. In the previous resettlement schemes, maybe some of your churches were involved in helping to resettle Syrians. One of the biggest charities involved in that was over 6 years. They only managed to resettle 150 families. So the scale of this thing is so much bigger. Look, Paul can join us and he can tell us a little bit more about the scheme. Hey, Paul, nice to see you.
Hey, can you hear me, Krish?
Yes, we can hear you. Hey, you did it.
Thank you.
Did it. You didn't have to put a tie on for us. It was very kind of you.
Oh, thank you, Krish.
But Paul, can I just say, look, we think you're doing a brilliant job. I've seen you in action, and you've got a lot of balls in the air trying to sort all these things out. Well done. We're here as the faith communities to play our part to cheer you on. A lot of people are interested in what might come down the line with phase two, because when the Home Secretary announced this scheme, she mentioned faith groups and businesses. I know you might not have a timetable for that, but can you give us an inkling so that all these pastors from around the UK just might have some idea of what they might need to get ready for?
Yeah, of course, Krish. And I mean, it's so on one level, it's great to be talking to everyone. On another level, I'm sorry, I'm talking to us all in such desperate times. And speaking candidly and just so you know me, not everyone will have come across me. Some of you I may have worked with you in the past. Krish and I have worked very closely for a number of years now. We first worked together on the Syrian resettlement program back in 2015, and I'm a director. I'm currently in the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Then I was in the Home Office. It's very much a whole of government approach, what we're doing here, in many ways, is utterly different in terms of scale and what we're asking for, and the role that faith sector, organizations and charities and others are going to be playing. But in some ways, there are similarities. And I guess the thing I wanted to start with is one similarity that I am desperately keen that we all ensure we continue, is that this is a whole of society effort. This is everyone has been moved by what's happening. The evidence of that is there in the numbers that Krish was talking around. I feel quite emotional thinking around the 150,000 of our fellow citizens who want to do the humane thing to provide safety to people who are in the most desperate circumstances. And the only way we're going to make this work, if we're going to treat it as a whole of society, is if we just work together, and we will see us all as having a role to play. And I come here, I guess, with an offer. In the way that I work with you, I work with Krish very closely. You won't be surprised to hear that I think Krish has had me on speed dial. I'm very glad to hear. And so what I'm going to be talking around is maybe giving a picture of how things are standing at the moment, but really making that open offer, that call to action of how we can get ourselves to the next stage of this in a way that really makes the thing work as well as it possibly. I think we owe that to the people who are volunteering. We owe that to the people who will be looking after. So very, very briefly then. So as Krish says, and I'm sure you'll have heard about, we are currently in what has been termed phase 1 of the programme. You know, it's a bit of a civil servicey kind of language around phases 1 and phase 2. But broadly speaking, the period we're in now is that the government has opened a scheme where people in the United Kingdom can sponsor, host, offer 6 months accommodation to people. And I think largely in this initial period where we're working, a lot of the connections that we're getting through are going to be people who already know people. So it'll be friends, it'll be acquaintances, there'll be a variety of connections, I think, which is allowing the links to happen. But one of the things that Krish and I have obviously been talking around is that many of those people who have made that incredibly generous offer won't necessarily know people in Europe, in Ukraine, in those desperate circumstances. So the thing that we want to work through and think about is how can we collaborate together. Obviously, by definition, you collaborate together to make that effective so that we can start making those connections. And one of the things I would say is that I am just talking to people. I'm just really struck that people are beginning to make those connections. There are connections across all the different denominations and in Europe, and people are beginning to make those kind of connections. And I'm already hearing amazing stories of generosity and the role that churches are playing in supporting people and making that arrangement so that people are genuinely getting into the system. I think I should probably just update on a couple of bits that I think people will be thinking a lot around. So Krish and I have been talking around the way that the policy has been constructed reflects the desperate times we're in. You know, the situation that Krish, I'm sure, will have updated you on, will have seen on the ground, of the position that people are in and the need for us to quickly get people, in a position where they can take up the offers. It means that as people come in, there will be some pre-arrival checks on people. So everyone who is applying for a visa and all of the adults in the sponsor households will have a degree of checking done against criminal databases, all of the things that you might expect the government to do. And then I think what's really critical, because I know that there will be concerns around the safeguarding piece, is that we're working very closely with our colleagues and partners in local government around a very early aftercare arrangement, so that we can make sure that people are, visiting and checking in that this is going right. It means it's a bit different from what you may have worked with us on some of the other resettlement programs, from, for example, Syria, where there was a very different situation, where there were populations who had been in refugee camps around the region for very long periods of time, and we were working with the UN, and we could have a long lead in time where we did lots of checks on the accommodation and so on prior to arrival. But it really puts the onus on the effectiveness of that aftercare. And just to reassure you, the way the system is working, we're making sure that we're flowing through the information that our colleagues in local government need in order to make that happen. And I don't want to in any way belittle the concerns we have around that. I feel them very acutely as well. We've got to strike the right balance and keep us safe. Krish is right to say that as we develop the scheme, what we want to do is collaborate with you on thinking around how we can move away from what we've got at the moment, which is the individual matching, which, as I say, I think will be a really important tool, particularly for those people who already know people in the Ukraine. I think it's really important that we open that fast. But what I want to be able to do is have a conversation with organisations, including many represented on this call, around how can we make it so potentially it's not just at that individual level, so that we're thinking around organisations being able to step into that position of being sponsors, and in the way we design that, thinking around how the organisations themselves, everyone here will be very familiar with all of the issues around safeguarding and how they think around the volunteers and the volunteering that's done in our communities. So how can we build on that? And I want to get us to the position where we can have a proper conversation around that. In terms of timing, I'm not going to give you an absolute timing on how quickly we can get that stood up, because I want to have the right conversations and I want to do it in a way which we're talking. But just to reassure you, that is not a civil servant coming on a call and saying we need to take a bit of time, and that time is months. It's not months. It's not months. We haven't got months. Let's be candid. Right. So we need to get straight into that and start having those conversations around how we make it work. So really I think, Krish, I am probably talking far too long, but I just wanted to give people a flavour and a sense, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions, and we can not just today, but keep going and keep the conversation going.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And look, I think we've had 1,800 churches sign up to be ready to be those community sponsors. And on the rest of this call, we're going to be talking about how churches can support hosts. So even in advance of phase 2 coming, we think absolutely. There's things that churches can do to wrap around hosts so that you're not just an individual family or person welcoming a Ukrainian, but churches can play their part to provide that, almost sponsoring that host family, if you like. So we'll keep you in the loop as we develop our thinking, because we're hearing lots of really interesting things from the ground. Just one quick question that came up from the chat was, it does seem that some of the devolved nations are taking slightly different approaches. Can you just give us a couple of sentences to help us understand that?
Yes, of course. And the Scottish and Welsh governments in particular, the approach that they're taking is that they are named themselves as sponsors. The phrase that is used is super sponsors, and they are therefore, people can go online and log in and have a connection to Scotland and Wales in that way. We, just to reassure everyone, this is a whole of UK effort, and I have been in lots and lots of calls with my counterparts from those governments, and that's the approach they're taking for a particular strand with the connection to the Scottish government. There will be people in Scotland and Wales as well who will be using the individual matching. So there will be people in Scotland who have friends who they want to bring in. So it does go alongside that, and we are collaborating with them. But that's how that strand of the programme works, Krish.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for joining us, Paul. I know you're crazy busy, so we release you.
Yeah, and sorry for talking at such length, but I just wanted to convey just really that spirit of we're in it together. Let's keep working. And Krish, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Wonderful. We are told in the Bible that we pray for those in authority and power. So you could at least know we're praying for you, and practically we're ready to do whatever we can to support you and the government's work in this area. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. That is very great succor. So thank you.
Excellent.